It's not the Knicks versus the Pistons in the first round. It's New York versus everybody, because there's a lot of folks that think that the Knicks are actually the underdogs in this series. So let's talk Knicks basketball with Jonathan Macri of Knicks Film School. J-Mac, let's hop straight into this because you know the narrative that's out there right now. Stephen A. say the Pistons scared the living hell out of them, and Shaq says that he doesn't even think the Knicks are good enough to advance into the second round. What's your response to the narrative out there that the Pistons are going to win this series?
Yeah, I mean, I'll admit that that's the first time that I've heard those two particular takes because I tend to get my basketball analysis from people who actually watch basketball. But I listen, I hear where people are coming from, and the notion that this Knicks team should be, have their guard up against a Pistons group that has absolutely had one of the greatest single season turnarounds in NBA history, won 30 more games than last year, I think is valid. And I think it's more valid because not because of how the Pistons have played, and the Pistons are a fantastic story, bring energy every night, they defend hard, they know what they're doing on offense, they have a game plan, all that stuff. But it's because I think through 82 games, we have yet to see what we feel like is the absolute best version of this Knicks roster, given the talent that they have. Now, I could sit here and say that and still acknowledge, hey, this is a team that won 51 games, and we could point to all the big games that they've lost, and they haven't really beaten very many good teams this year. But there's still some good stuff going on here, and I almost think maybe we've turned the narrative around too much, where we should be looking at a group that, all right, they haven't played really great basketball since opening night, and they still found a way to win 51 games on talent alone. Now you're giving them a week to lock in, a week to rest, a week to prepare for a particular opponent. I think there is a world where a lot of these prognosticators may come out looking a little silly, but listen, that's why they play the games.
There's another narrative out there that the Pistons are the more physical team in
Sure.
this matchup. Would you push back on that narrative?
Not this season, no, because the Pistons have been the more physical team against the Knicks. They've had some big time offensive rebounding games. They have turned the Knicks over. They had one game, Knicks committed 18 turnovers. Another game, Knicks committed 17 turnovers. That's very uncharacteristic of New York. And like you go watch a guy like Isaiah Stewart, that guy, he goes out there and he lives to push people around. That's what his MO is. He wants to get under your skin, and then you counterbalance that with like a karl-anthony Towns, who I think has been physical in his own right this year, but you see sometimes maybe that sort of play, that sort of physical play, he doesn't always respond well to that. So I do think the Pistons thrive on physicality, as is the nature of their history as an organization. But we are just a year removed from a Knicks team, and there's a lot of the same pieces from that team that went out there and they out physical basically anyone that they played. So again, it's okay to go with that narrative. I don't think it's a completely crazy narrative, but I think we've gone maybe a little bit too far in the other direction. I think the Knicks are more than capable of getting down and dirty if that's what the series is going to call for.
Well, when you talk about being 1 year removed from a team that can get down and dirty, I mean, they had Julius Randle, he's gone. Dante DiVincenzo, we see him going viral, fighting on the court out there. And then they've also lost Isaiah Hartenstein.
Yes.
Now you bring in Mikal Bridges and karl-anthony Towns. True or false? And then give us your why. The Knicks don't move on to the second round unless Mikal Bridges and karl-anthony Towns have a huge impact on the court this series.
So I think it's a tough question because for one, I
True,
think that
false, and then your
false,
why. There we go. Keep
false.
going. All right, now go. Now go.
It's false, and but it's a complicated false, right? Because if Karl-Anthony Towns and Mikal Bridges are no shows or essentially no shows on both sides of the court, then I think it's going to be hard for the Knicks to move on. However, I think the most important thing that Mikal Bridges could do, without question, and to some extent, the most important thing that Karl-Anthony Towns could do is hold up on the defensive end. So Mikal Bridges is going to get the primary assignment out of the gate on Cade Cunningham. If he just completely flops and they need to go and pivot to OG Anunoby, or I mean, really, OG Anunoby would be the obvious pivot in like a game two or even a game three, that would be a massive win for the Pistons. And then where karl-anthony Towns is concerned, look, we've seen stretches of decent to even, dare I say, good karl-anthony Towns defense this year. And then we have seen stretches, and I've gone back and watched the tape against this Pistons team where he is head in the clouds, not sure what he's thinking, karl-anthony Towns. If the Pistons get to feast on that guy defensively, they're going to be able to score almost regardless of what any of the other Knicks are doing on defense. On the offensive end, I would say of the two, by far, karl-anthony Towns, there's a little bit more pressure on him to produce offensively. But again, it's not so much that he needs to go out there and score 30 points. He needs to be willing to take threes, because the Pistons have put centers on him throughout this matchup. I believe that they will open with their centers, whether it's Jalen Duren or Isaiah Stewart, on karl-anthony Towns. And if they're going to give him a little bit of room behind the arc, he needs to fire it up. Now, what does he need to convert from back there? 35%, 40%, 45%. That's less important to me as much as him being a threat and them having to play up on him so we could put the ball on the floor, put pressure on the defense, get his driving game going, and then ideally maybe even make some passes off of those drives. But I don't want to ask for too much from New York starting center.
You mentioned having a week to prepare for the Pistons, and then Bridges drawing the assignment of trying to stop Cade Cunningham. This dude has had some huge games against the Knicks this season. If you're Tibbs, how do you come into this series, or at least game one, trying to stop Cade Cunningham?
Variety. It's going to have to be variety, because you could stick, McCall on him, you could stick OG on him, you could stick Josh Hart, Deuce Pride, whoever you want on him. The Pistons are going to do everything in their power to bring Jalen Brunson into every action involving Cade Cunningham. They are going to be relentless in setting ball screens. And the advantage that they are going to have with their centers, no, they don't have a Kristaps Porzingis or even like a Miles Turner, who is someone that is a threat to pick and pop and bend your defense in that way. But their centers are big, as you said, physical dudes. They set brutally hard screens. So if you are able to, get Cade going downhill that way, that's one way that you could be a threat. And then the Brunson piece of it, no, Tim Hardaway Jr. or Malik Beasley, who are the guys that Brunson is going to be guarding, they don't set quite as hard a screen, but it's a hard enough screen. It's enough of a presence where if you're Jalen Brunson, you're going to need to decide what you're doing in those scenarios. So I imagine most of the time the Knicks are going to hedge and recover, where Brunson will show temporarily on Cade, put a little pressure on, and then try to retreat back to whoever he's guarding. And that brings up other challenges. And we saw the Knicks lose a game against the Pistons based on this exact coverage, because Malik Beasley finished second to Anthony Edwards and made threes this season. He's had one of the greatest three-point shooting seasons in the history of the league. And he moves around a lot. So if you're Jalen Brunson and you need to hedge and then recover back to that guy, like, you better be on your toes. Otherwise, you're liable to give up an open three, and this guy has been making basically everything the entire year. So in that sense, I think the Knicks do need to switch up what they do, maybe switch Brunson onto Cade here and there, maybe do a hard double occasionally, depending on who else is involved in the action. So a lot of different ways to go. Keep confusing him. The one thing Cade Cunningham does a little bit more than you'd like is turn the ball over. So the different looks that you could show him, or the more different looks you could show him, I think the more likely it is you're going to get to see some giveaways. Knicks get into some easy action in transition and score that way.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that it's going to take a variety of ways to stop this kid. And, I mean, you have a Tom Thibodeau who's been looked at as a defensive-minded coach, a defensive guru in this league. So I imagine there's a little pressure on him to put together some sort of game plan to slow this kid down. And I know I've asked you this before, but things have changed in the NBA since then. With all the head coaches that are out there that have been fired already and that are going to need some jobs this offseason. Again, I understand back-to-back 50-win seasons for the Knicks. The franchise is finally stable and looking like it's trending in the right direction. But if the Knicks lose this series, again, with all those coaches that are out there, is Tibbs gone?
I was like, good organizational vibes, are only as strong in this league as, the last result. And that goes doubly, triply, quadruply so, tentuply so. I don't know if that's a word, but I'm making it up for a playoff series. If Tom Thibodeau doesn't make it out of the first round, or if the Knicks don't make it out of the first round, doesn't matter how it happens, honestly. Even you could say that there's injuries, but guess what? If the Knicks get injured in the series, guess who's going to be shouldering the blame for that? The
Tibbs.
guy who has gone out there and he's played these guys a lot of minutes. Tom Thibodeau is going to be gone. I think the only question left is if they, like, what does he need to do in the second round? And I realize I'm getting ahead of myself here. To, I don't want to say save his job, but to prove to the front office that he is the right guy to lead this thing forward. And I think that I don't think we know that answer yet. And it may actually depend on how good they look in this round. Like if the Knicks, people are expecting this long, tough series against the Pistons. If the Knicks go out there and they beat the Pistons in 4 or 5 games and they look like the version of the team that many people expected coming into this year, and it's like, oh, okay, they always kind of knew what they had. They always knew the path. They always were going to be able to do it. They were just, 82 games a long time. They were experimenting, whatever you want to say. And then they go out there and they lose in tough, 6 or 7 games to Boston. I think Thibodeau's going to be back. If this is a tough series against the Pistons, and then it's maybe not a blowout, but let's say they lose in 6 to Boston, I'm not even sure in that scenario would Tibbs be back because and the last thing I'll say on him, I've been a big proponent of Tom. He's been responsible for so much of the good things that have happened in this organization since he's been brought aboard. He has always been looked at as a guy that you need to give him players that fit his ethos, his mantras, and that will go to bat for him come hell or high water. Last year's team, and to some extent, really every team he's had up until this year, that's been what's been the case. Isaiah Hardenstein, Dante DiVincenzo. You won't find a guy in the league who worships Tom Thibodeau like Dante DiVincenzo does. Isaiah Hardenstein has gone on the record and talked about the impact that Tom Thibodeau had on his career. Julius Randle, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse, he had that sort of relationship with Tom Thibodeau. This year's group, I mean, obviously we had the Mikal Bridges comments. I think Karl likes Tom, but they've obviously had a pass there. But I don't know as a whole, as a collective group, if you would look at this group and say, yeah, this is a Tibbs team, and it begs the question, all right, if you give Tibbs a team that is not a typical Tibbs team, is there a ceiling on how far they can go? And I think we're about to find out. We're going to start finding out in what is it, Wednesday? 3 days from now, right?
Yep. Tip off Saturday, 6 p.m. This is must-watch TV. I think that all of the NBA is going to be watching this series for a multitude of reasons. But J Mac, thanks for hopping on with us, my guy.
Always appreciate it. Yeah, I think it should be a fun series. And if you're a Knicks fan who's kind of been out on this team for a little while, it wouldn't kill you to get back in. This team's a good team. There's a good basketball team in there somewhere, and I think maybe, just maybe, we'll see it come out at the right time. But we'll, like I said, we'll find out soon enough.